Dear Heavenly Father, thank you that you make all things new. Thank you for all that you've allowed into our lives this past year, the good and the hard things that have reminded us how much we need you and to continually rely on your presence each day. We pray for your spirit to lead our steps this new year. We ask that you guide our decisions and turn our hearts to deeply desire you above all else. We ask that you will open doors needing to be opened and close the ones needing to be shut tight. We ask that you would help us release our grip on the things to which you've said no, not yet, or wait. We ask for help to pursue you first above every dream and desire you've put within our hearts. We ask for your wisdom, strength, and power to be constantly present within us, and we pray you would make us strong and courageous for the road ahead. Give us ability beyond what we feel able. Let your gifts flow freely through us so that you would be honored by our lives and others would be drawn to you. We pray that you'd keep us far from the snares and traps of temptations, that you would whisper in our ear when we need to run and whisper in our heart when we need to stand our ground. We pray for your protection over our families, friends, and anyone who listens to this podcast. We ask for your hand to cover us and keep us distant from the enemy's evil intent, that you will be a barrier to surround us, that we'd be safe in your hands. We pray that you would give us discernment and insight beyond our years to understand your will, hear your voice, and know your ways. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Hey, you guys. Happy New Year, everybody. I'm your host, Emma from The Imagination. And today and this week, I am here with Becky and Bridget from the Save Our Children podcast for our annual New Year's episode. Together, the three of us make up Stand By Survivors LLC. And for the last few years, we've been on a journey together to bring awareness to human trafficking, SRA, and child abuse of all kinds. It's been a while since we've caught up, and per usual, you're going to get to sit in on a genuine and non-scripted conversation between friends on a mission to make the future a better place for our children. I absolutely adore these two women and ask that you give them your full attention. So sit back, enjoy this fun conversation, and Happy New Year's to you all. Ladies, what is going on? I'm so excited to be here with you too.
Yay, we haven't talked in months.
I know, it's been
like online anyway.
Yeah, especially for a podcast. So
yeah.
I'm excited because people are going to get to kind of catch up with us.
I know you guys will get to hear our raw reactions to each other's conversations because, yeah, we talk in our messages and through podcasting here and there and watching each other's podcasts. But at the same time, we also have a lot going on, too, with advocacy in our own daily lives. So we haven't even got to talk on the hot trending topics, which aren't really trending, but
well, they're trending. They're not so hot.
Right? There you go.
So why don't you two catch us up on kind of what you've been up to and what's been going on with the podcast, just because you guys haven't been on here for a while. So let's give people an update, and for people on your show too who might be wondering.
Yeah, so it's been not announced, but I talked to the ladies, I don't know, it was about a month and a half ago, and I myself have decided to kind of step back from the podcast. And that doesn't mean that I'll never be on and that I'll never do anything. I'm sure we'll have conversations, and when people come on, that'll be what it is. But I've just really been called to do more work with my church, but also even the boys have found that it takes away from the stuff that they are doing. And unfortunately, in my world, during the day, I don't have a lot of things going on, but at night, it's something every single night of the week, and it's got a little crazy. And so I'm unfortunately, not unfortunately, I'll say fortunately for me, unfortunately for, because I love what we were doing and what we've done, I've just decided that now is the time to kind of step back. And it doesn't mean that the advocacy stops for me. It doesn't mean that we're not doing anything. The podcast still sits, and we were actually talking before it started that we started this, like Bridget said, we started this before this became a hot topic. Like, there has been, now you hear all the stuff that's happening, and we're like, yeah, we talked about this 2 years ago. There's an episode about this. And so we are able to say we have like 80 some episodes on our podcast that you can go back and listen to, that we've talked to survivors, we've talked to other parents, we've talked to people who are working to try and keep our kids safe. And so for me, I get to kind of now shift over to my church, and I've become the co-lead of the human trafficking ministry. And it's amazing to me. It is amazing to me how surface level people know trafficking. And that's the part that is where my heart now is this idea of, how do we keep people safe if you continue to think it's everywhere else? And we have parents, especially in our neighborhood, in our community. We live in a relatively affluent community. Every kid has some sort of device. We have all of this stuff, but these parents have no idea how dangerous these devices are, or where their kids are at any time, or what's happening. And so my goal this year for church is to really start informing parents what the dangers are out there just within my town. Like, I don't need this. This is great. We get to reach out there, but just kids in our own backyard have these issues. And so we're actually putting on, in a couple of weeks, our first Stop Traffic Walk. It's with the Phoenix Dream Center. They have one north of Phoenix. We're doing one on the east side of Phoenix. And then again, this summer, we're going to do the Lighthouse Summit like we did 2 years ago. And so it's really a cool opportunity, because I get to meld. When I quit my job last year, I said, okay, God, I need you to bring me together trafficking, some way to do design work and training people and teaching people, and the church. And this kind of fell into my lap. And so it's just, this is the season that I'm in, and this is where I'm going. And I am so excited to see where it leads and lends itself and moves toward. And I feel like I'm going to blow a few people's minds. And I'm excited that I have you guys to to fall back on, and to have all of this stuff available for them.
And really quick, I want to back up, because even though Becky says she's stepping away from the podcast, what I want to clarify when it comes to the podcast is, when we first started this and Emma and I first connected, before we even met Becky, like, these projects were our little baby. And we were like, this is what we want. This is what we want advocacy to look like. This is what we're not seeing. And so we shifted that in what we wanted it to look like. And so we've been very, very strict as far as discernment, and taking step back and praying on things, letting God lead us in which direction we needed to be pulled. So when we all came together, and even meeting Becky, is we were still always transparent with what we were doing in the community. And what a lot of people don't see in the advocacy world is we volunteer, and it's something that we choose to do, whether it's, we often say we model our behavior. So putting our money where our mouth is, going and volunteering, and getting out and doing it in our community as well. So we never stopped in our community. We always had the community, and we had our podcast. So there comes balance and family in that as well. And then trying to make time for you. What people don't see, and what we often try to push back on, is it's okay to take a break, or the mental health aspect of it, because we're taking on so much, and we're learning as we're going through it. There's things that we now know that we didn't know when we first started advocacy, and we've learned and grown as well. So even with the community stuff, like Becky and I in our own state have gone to safe houses. We've gone, and even as Becky said, 2 years ago, we were at the Lighthouse Summit, and we're like, one day we're going to be on stage leading survivor events. One day we're going to get into a church. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And so we had already started that transition with Becky's church when that opportunity came about. And then she got deeper into it once we realized the surface level. Me and Becky sat there at some meetings, and it's hard to sit there and say, like, even like some conversations where I'm like, oh, that's satanic ritual abuse. And then they look at you and you're like, and I'm like, oh, Bridget, pump the brakes. We got to break this, this, and this down. And so it's like, we don't want to blow your, like, we found ourselves saying, we don't want to blow your brains out just yet, but like, there's still more and there's more. And so we try not to sugarcoat the conversation, but at the same time, mentally, it's a lot for people. And so when you take it into the church, because the church isn't fully talking about it. So when you're going into the deep levels where we are, and then they're getting pushed to our podcast, it is so overwhelming. So even just knowing, like with our podcast, even with Emma, is we hand walk people through the human trafficking. Like, what is that? How to identify it? Because it was so much even for us to still take on and try to get people to understand it from a survivor's point of view, and to even step in their shoes to say, hey, I can listen to your story, and hold a space for them. And that's one thing that right now is we're all holding space for everyone as this information continues to come out. So I just wanted to clear that up, is like, community's always been here.
Yep.
And I have to say too,
Exactly.
I am so proud of both of you. It's really neat looking back a few years ago when we felt really helpless and we're like, what can we do about this? We didn't even know what our options were to do something. And as your podcast evolved, you're empowering parents to spend time with their children, to be present with their children, to love their children, to start in your communities. And you've really nailed that on the head in your own lives. And I think that's amazing to see your own evolution evolved as your podcast did, as you guys learned more and got really clear on, all right, I might not be able to save the world, but maybe I can save my little community. Maybe I can save some of the parents from having to go through what some of my podcast guests do. Maybe I can save my own family from ever having, any more trauma that I could possibly be responsible for passing on to my kids. I love that you guys have really taken that initiative, and it shows how much and how ingrained all this information has become in you because of this natural evolution of, all right, I don't know where to start. I'm going to start with a podcast, and I'm going to start looking around my city, my town, to knowing exactly the direction of, all right, this is where I need to start prioritizing. The podcast is great and I'm still going to be involved with it, but my children I only get so many years with them. I need to be present with them. I need to set the example in my household that I was doing on my podcast. And I was preaching starting in the community, and I advise everybody else to do that. And now look at both of you. You both know your community better than anybody else does. You know what church that you needed to work with that would be open to this. Becky, you created a position at your church. Like, what other church has a human trafficking division? Like, that doesn't happen. But that starts with these simple conversations of just babying somebody through the information and bringing it up over and over and over again until one other mother cares, or until somebody in the, church clergy cares, or until somebody in the safe house cares, whoever it is. It just shows the impact that you can have on a community by actually taking this information and implementing it in your lives. And I love the evolution that this has come about in both of your lives, where people can literally see what can happen when you start learning about it and when you start diving into what's literally right around you.
Yeah.
And even,
go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, even too with you, Emma, like, you are tackling the toughest conversations, the darkest conversations, and nobody on the internet is even scratching the surface on. They won't touch the topic, especially when it comes to secret societies and satanic ritual abuse. And so those are the tough conversations, and that is such a hard pill to swallow for so many people. But with those conversations, and even your evolution and everything that you've taught us, survivors have taught all of us, is you have grown so much as well, not only in podcasting, but now, like, you're teaching everyone globally to where we constantly get DMs of, oh my gosh, I was out in my community and I'm seeing these symbols, or, I can now depict it. And so us just having these conversations, we're helping people globally. And you're now creating a space. And what we always wanted was survivors to have a space to come and be safe, to have these conversations and know they're not alone and to be heard. And for all of it to truly be survivor led and not doing things for clout, and whether it's brand ambassador or whatever is trending right now, like, you should not have to be paid to talk about this topic. It is children and human lives. And that's what a lot of people do not realize, is how deep it truly goes. So you are having these conversations every single day, and you're recording and balancing it all. And so like that is a lot mentally to take in and still show up on screen. Because what people don't see is all of us, we do have breakdowns. We do cry. Our hearts are heavy and we're like, what else can we do? And so some days, like, people don't see the behind the scenes of the suicide prevention with survivors, or all the moms we talk to and the victims. Hey, where can I get help? And we're like, it's hard for us to say, I don't trust this person. I don't know who to send you to, because right now I'm seeing so many people switch sides and controlled opposition. So even you have created that space where so many people trust you and saying, can I just talk to you and tell you my story? So even being a part of working with you in the advocacy space as well, and seeing you grow, you've done so much as well. So thank you for all that you do, because honestly, there's situations that I've personally been in, even in the advocacy world, we can all relate to that, where people have tried to DM us, or whether it's taking us out to dinner or buying us a drink and then trying to lead to a different situation. But now we know the red flags, and now we can pick apart certain things, and we're like, no, I don't know if I trust that. So, and it goes back to trusting yourself and the intuition. So again, thank you for all that you do and that you've taught us as well.
And for people listening to you, like, podcasting is a big commitment. You're seeing the final hour and a half, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, but you don't understand how much research Becky and Bridget would put in every week. Like, whenever you have a guest, if they have anything out, as far as interviews to watch or articles that they've done or social media to go browse through, like, it is extensive research that goes into this too. So I want you all to understand too, just the amount of work that goes into this. Like, it is very intentional. It's dear to our hearts. And when you consider Becky and Bridget are both 2 full-time boss ladies, 2 full-time mamas, Becky has a husband involved with church. Bridget does everything under the sun pretty much. And she's literally an advocate for every single survivor. You can just go look at her, I can't even keep up with her social media because she's so supportive of everybody. It's amazing what she's able to do every day, as far as, it might not be, as much time podcasting, but you better believe when she gets a little break from work, like, she's making a TikTok video, she's doing something to bring awareness to what's going on. And literally, like, middle of the night, she's doing stuff, it's amazing. But what I want people to understand is just, this is a lot of work, and I'm not married, I don't have kids. And so for me, and I have a very intensive job. So for me, podcasting is the easiest thing for me to do, because I can't as easily go take time out of my day and go visit safe houses or volunteer. But I can do this at night or early in the morning, or on weekends. So for me, like, podcasting is my thing. But that's kind of the takeaway that we are always trying to advocate for in our podcast, is we each have our own unique puzzle. And just because somewhere that you start doesn't mean that's necessarily where you'll end up. And that there's so many different opportunities that you can create for yourself. These girls, these women are a perfect example of that. Human trafficking division in a church, to me, it just blows my mind. It's such a neat thing. And I hope other churches see that and say, gosh, we need something like that here, because a lot of that happens in churches, and a lot of people are so naive to ever even considering that, to think that it could possibly be dangerous to send a child to a church, So the moral of my story is, I commend you guys for all the work that you have done, because I don't know how you do it. Like, it's hard for me to squeeze in podcasting without a husband and kids, house responsibilities. Like, I think it's just amazing that you guys did so much and that you continue to still fit in so much, even though there's literally every single obstacle possible that could prevent you from doing any of this.
Well,
Yeah,
too,
that's
and like for you, Emma, and what Becky and I have even been told is actually it even happened on one of our podcasts, is these podcasts are being taken to safe houses or to the advocacy space where people are now working with survivors of SRA. And so now they're learning what that is. And so I know that for us, there's a lot of people who've turned to the podcasting because whether it comes to MK Ultra, and I've seen it right now, the military, there is so many victims and survivors who do not know that they are a survivor of MK Ultra. And so as more information continues to come out, and I know one thing is we haven't even got to talk about is the whole Balenciaga saga. But with all of that, it triggered so many victims and survivors. And it was a double-edged sword because it didn't even need to go down that route, but everyone just went down the cannibalism route. But all people should have needed to see was the child and say, this is enough to stand up. Why do we have to go through all these rabbit holes and dig? And that's what was so mind-blowing to me is everyone's like, what, did you see this? Did you see this? And it's like, yeah, go to Emma's podcast, go to our podcast. Hello, we've been talking about it. Survivors. And so just seeing even those things are mind-blowing because it's like, what is it going to take to get people to stand up and do something?
And it's crazy because now Balenciaga is partnering with Disney Plus. I don't know if you saw that. And so I've had people go, what? Why would Disney do that? And I'm like, because you don't know about Disney. Like that is literally what Disney does in all of the different things. So no, that's actually a really good partnership if you're going to be terribly honest, because they both do the same thing. But it's almost like, okay, how is that going to start waking people up? And that's the weirdest world that we're in, is like things are happening. Okay, well, that's weird, but who is going to be woken up by this? Mm-hmm. That we now get to have these conversations. And going back to, it was interesting, going back to my church, they actually even allowed, not only do they have a human trafficking ministry, they actually allowed me to get up and do a like 90-second video that played at all of our services. So we're talking 5,000 people probably saw about human trafficking. And it was nothing big, again, surface level, like the idea that we need to rescue these people, we need to rehabilitate them, their long-term services, blah, 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 all those things. But my parents watched the video with me originally because it was on YouTube. And I was like, I'm not going to church and seeing my face for the first time in church. So I had to watch the video. And my dad's comment was, and this is very typical, my dad's comment was, if those Democrats don't stop letting the border be out of control, this wouldn't happen. And I started to argue back. And then I was like, you don't, first of all, like, you know what I do. You know that I have a podcast. We have an organization. I do this at church, and you're going to argue with me about what human trafficking is. Okay, cool. All right. Well, I'm going to walk away because you very obviously don't want to hear anything. So I walked away. I came back a couple minutes later, and my mom says to me, so if it isn't that, then what are you fighting for? And I said, I'm not saying that it isn't that, because there is a border issue. We do have trafficking over the border, blah, blah, blah. This administration has made it worse, all the things, whatever. I said, but every single time you say the Democrat this, you make it a Republican issue. It's not a partisan issue. It's not politics at all. I said, we have kids that are probably being abused in our neighborhood currently that we'll never know. We have prostitutes down the street. We have pornography that we're dealing with. We have all, yes, the phone, the exploitation, all the stuff. That's the issue. this is only one portion of the issue. And the more you continue to think that this is the issue, the harder you're making our job. And so they're actually like, yeah, that makes sense. So again, I don't know what's all going to happen, but it's that those little steps, like they're hearing this in the world, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, you weren't so crazy. Like, Bridget, that happened with your family at Christmas. That, oh my gosh, did you know about this? And Bridget's like, what?
Yeah, it was funny to hear my mom listening to my little brother just talk about like secret societies, all the symbolism, and like Disney and everything as far as like the entertainment industry, and what the holiday truly meant, and not putting Disney out, and what all of it meant. And so when we were having these conversations at the table, I was like, how come you'll openly listen to him, but when I say it, like, I'm kind of crazy. I'm the conspiracy theorist. And it came back down to the conversation of pretty much I'm out there more about it and very loud about it. So it comes back to safety. And I was like, I openly said, like, and I've said it since day one on the podcast. And I'm going to say it again for everybody who in their house or in their families, whatever it may be, they're the ones being loud and talking about it, is most people do not care until it's at their front door, until it happens to someone and this, or even your child. And God forbid that to happen to anyone. It shouldn't take that. And so for me, I've always said, maybe if something happened to me, I don't wish that upon myself, but maybe then you would listen. And so it came to the conversation of death. And I said, because everyone says, oh, what happens if you get Clinton, just in general in the world going around. And so I said, I'm not scared to die. Like, I already knew when I went to a couple of protests and we had the military and snipers over our head and right next to us, like, I didn't know what I was walking into, but I knew what was wrong and I knew what was right. And I knew where I was going to be standing and what I wanted to do. Because again, I would hate for this to happen to my niece, my nephew, my daughter, any child in the world. There's children, as I constantly say on every single podcast, children literally an hour and a half from our border. And there are nonprofits and 501c3s literally 20 minutes from our house who are profiting and making so much money off this topic of human trafficking. They will not talk about it. They will go to every big little event that we see them at. They will not put it on a podcast. They have a global platform. We have a border issue in Arizona. There's children being stuffed dead with fentanyl and walked across the border. And children are getting raped on rape trees, and people want to call it conspiracy because the government now tries to debunk that as conspiracy. But rape trees have a history in what they do, and they take the undergarments and hang them on trees, and it's glorified throughout the society, but people still want to try to label it conspiracy. So for me, it turned to the conversation of, I'm not scared to die. I'd rather it be me than, a child. So yeah, it came to some interesting conversations.
It is really fascinating though, watching, we have been talking about this for a long time, and sometimes it does get frustrating because people that have been following us will be like, oh, did you know this? Or family members who know what we do. Oh, did you know this is happening? And it's like, you literally watch my Instagram, or you live with me, or you're my family member, my friend. Like, what do you think I've been talking about, right? And what puts it in perspective for me is I think about, oh gosh, I'm frustrated after 3 years. Imagine being Kathy O'Brien and talking about this since the 60s. Like, how must she feel, But she always meets everybody with such compassion and love. And I want to remind people, just like how Becky and Bridget handle everything, you really got to pick your battles with this. I feel like the ones that know were meant to know. That way, when people do wake up, they have a loving embrace that they know that they can run to us and run into our arms, and they're going to be safe with us. and they're going to have a gentle place and a very compassionate place that they can learn about things that are really hard that might break somebody. So I just want to remind people too that that's going to happen more and more. If a lot of the people that watch our shows are people that are or have been or are awakened and may have been for a while. And I just want you to realize that there was a time when you didn't know too, and it required you to find those compassionate, loving people that were willing to write an article for you or do a podcast or have some type of a resource where you could go learn, and we're really grateful for all of you. If that was us in any way, if you've learned things from our show, we're so honored that you chose us. But I just want to remind everybody that it's going to keep happening, and we have to look at it like it's beautiful. And as frustrating as it might be to be like, I've been screaming this to you for years, we do have to have a really loving embrace whenever we talk about it, whenever we share it, and whenever we are engaging with people. Because going back to one of the things Bridget said too, she mentioned, a lot of the propaganda around, say, Balenciaga was, you saw very violent and graphic things. And one of the things that we have to realize as advocates when we're sharing information is that a lot of the stuff that's going to be implanted in TikTok, in Instagram, in the algorithms, the things that do get elevated are meant to be shared a lot so they can trigger and put more fear into the people that were victims of these things. Think about the worst events that you've ever went through. You just got over like a horrific breakup. And imagine if you had people in your life throwing everything possible in your face to remind you over and over and over again about what you just went through. When we go through something hard, we need to be met and have a safe space to heal. We need to have safe people around us, and we need to have safe places like online that we can go and connect with people to help our healing, and a lot of the stuff that's perpetuated online when there is a scandal is very graphic images. There's blood, there's, trigger words, there's programming, there's Masonic symbolism, Illuminati symbolism. Like there's a lot of things in there that if a satanic ritual abuse or human trafficking survivor is going to social media to maybe escape or connect with people, imagine how horrifying that is for them to see things that we're sharing that enclose things with violence or that have really, triggering images of children or possibly things that remind them of what they went through. So I just want to remind you guys too, whenever you're sharing stuff, be very aware of what you're sharing, because there are certain things that are allowed to be elevated on social media, and it's always for a purpose. A lot of the stuff we should be sharing are the things that aren't as graphic, that don't get as many views, and that are a softer place for people learning about this and for survivors to engage with this material. It's scary. It's like they performed rituals on victims and whenever they were kids, on survivors whenever they were kids, and it's like a continual ritual with how they want to keep triggering them over and over and over again. Like our whole society mocks satanic rituals abuse survivors in every way, whether it's at holidays, whether it's online, whether it's what scandals get elevated. And I just want to remind everybody that was something we had to learn, because as we are learning stuff, we're wanting to share everything, and we try to share. I know some of the stuff we share might kind of border that. And sometimes you do have to share things that are a little bit harder to see just for people to get a point across. But that's one of the things that I've heard is like social media doesn't always feel safe for survivors because of the material that's passed around and that the algorithm elevates can be very, very triggering for them to see. And it's also really hard for people that are brand new to just, be shocked with seeing that type of thing too.
And that's what I think the purpose of that algorithm is, because if it's shocking, then it becomes fiction, because that's what you would have seen. Oh my gosh, they would never do such a thing. That's just fake. That's whatever. Like, it's interesting to see what people think are fake versus what's real, when like most of what we see that the people think is real is fake. But it's wild to just like, it's wild when you pull out of society and you can kind of float above it like we are, how much is truly in your face that you are like, did they just say that, or did they just put that in there? Like, it's crazy. And I know I told you guys, speaking of Disney and trash, we went to go see the new Avatar movie. Again, it is what it is, and I can't have to kind of live life, but they had an entire section. First of all,
Wait,
What?
before
Okay.
we get to Avatar, the
Yes.
only thing I want to touch on with sharing like all of, even with the whole Balenciaga stuff that's coming out, and as more people dig into the fashion industry and all these industries, if it has to do with kids, one thing I've constantly tried to share is if you're resharing these images for the advocacy space and respect of the children, do not re-exploit them. So what that means is cover their face with a different, like, whatever
Sticker.
you want. Yeah, or the censorship logo or censorship icon, use that and put it over the child's face. And another thing when sharing these topics is identify it so people know what it is. So whether that's using the terms human trafficking, because most people just think human trafficking and sex, it all ties to sex. It does not.
Right.
So also use the terms of CSAM and CSEM so people start to see as far as the exploitation of children.
Tell
and
people what that means.
and tell so people can, so CSAM is child sexual abuse material, CSEM child sexual exploitation material. And so identify it so when people are seeing these images and topics, they know what to put as far as identification, and because it helps the survivors when they're sharing their stories in the advocacy space for everything that we're trying to educate and raise awareness on. It goes a lot further versus just seeing an image and saying, oh my gosh, this is cannibalism. This is also SRA, satanic ritual abuse. So we have to start identifying these things because, again, with change, there's so much awareness. So you have to start identifying it so it opens these conversations to deeper conversations. So that's one thing I just wanted to say when sharing these images as we continue to see them surface all over the internet.
That's a really good point because people aren't relating exploitation to being as simple as taking a picture of a kid in a bikini and then using it or whatever. And so, and the big thing is so many people nowadays are exploiting themselves and we don't even realize it. Like you look at OnlyFans, you look at all this stuff and they, oh my gosh, how could someone do that to them?
Well, and I
Well, they're
think
doing
too, it brings awareness. Like you see people tagging Balenciaga like crazy. So now everybody, I didn't even know. I'm not a fashion person. I had never heard of
and I'm
Balenciaga
not rich.
before any of this. So now, like, I know what Balenciaga is, and I didn't know what it was before all this happened. Like, I don't do anything designer. I don't care about any of that. Like, I don't know what, besides like some of the main ones, but now I know. And so, like, people that are into that, like, you're helping promote a brand instead of showcasing the child. Like, now everybody knows what Balenciaga is, but not everybody knows now what SRA is. Not everybody knows what child exploitation is or child sexual abuse material. So that is a very, very important point that Bridget made, that we need to start elevating the right topics instead of continuing to promote these abusive companies and people that we plaster all over these our posts. We need to focus on the child instead of the brand is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, that's a great point.
Okay, now back to Avatar.
No, and it really isn't anything. My point of the whole thing was, again, and we've talked about this, they tell us what they're doing. They always tell us what they're doing. You can like Avatar in and of itself is what they're currently doing, where they take out the consciousness of one person and put it into a clone. I mean, they have cloning group, like what is it, Clonaid? Isn't that the name of one of them? That's like a big one. And I mean, there's people who talk about this, that they've been to cloning centers and they do all this stuff. So none of that is, I don't want to say none of it's new. I mean, sure, it's new to some people, but again, you look at Avatar and you look at all the science and you're like, yeah, that happens. Like there would be no doubt in my mind that all that happens. Now, do I think they make them into blue people? No, but you know what I mean? It's all of that. But in this movie, and I'm not going to give away, it doesn't give away any of the movie, but in one part they are
people don't watch it. Like I didn't watch it and I don't care to support them. So give it away. Spoil alert. There's your head.
Well, there isn't really, it's a 3-hour movie. There'd be way too much to spoil. But one of the parts that they have in there is they're hunting these whales, whatever type of whale it is, doesn't matter. And they go through this entire process where they get a calf, a mom and a calf. And the point of the calf is that calf is so slow that it'll keep the mom from swimming away, because the mom's never going to leave her calf behind. And so it's all of this like just horrific stuff that of course we all know happens in the world. And so they end up killing the mom. The baby of course then dies, but they don't care about any of that. What they're doing is they open the whale's mouth really big, and they go in there and they literally drill straight to the top of the roof of the mouth. And then they're like, well, there's this substance that comes out of this gland in the roof of the mouth. And if it would have been pink, I probably would have screamed, but it was yellow. But of course, we all know the pineal gland is right at the roof of your mouth, right in the back of your head. And that's where we get adrenochrome, where we have all of that stuff. And so now we have this whale and they're literally draining this thing. And the guy's like, this vial is worth $80 million and keeps people young.
Oh, and
Are
children,
freaking
kids are watching this.
kidding me? Now, if you have no idea, like if you've never heard of adrenochrome, you have no idea what a pineal gland is, you would be none the wiser. You would go along and be like, oh, that's cool. Like, oh, that poor whale, whatever, blah, blah, blah. We should probably save the whales tomorrow, whatever. You would have no idea. But when you become aware and they tell you what they're doing, it is shocking to sit in anything. Like I think in 2022, I saw 2 movies because I can't.
How did your kids react to that? Because your kids
I was going to ask that.
You picked some other movies.
So we don't. So it's fun to actually sit in the theater next to Connor, because that kid is like super aware and he sits and watches YouTube on all the conspiracies. So like he knows all the things about all the things. He's totally my kid. And so when I went, ooh, he's like, what? And so I was like, that's like adrenochrome in the pineal gland. And he's like, oh my God. And so that he knew it. I talked to Peyton. He's like, I don't know what a pineal gland is. I was like, well, obviously you're not listening to me, child. But he didn't know. And so then I had to explain to him what it was. And so at first, when I first dug into all of this, it was funny because Connor's like, would you stop ruining my movies? Everything you say, you're reading my, and now he'll be the one to be like, did you see that? Did you see that? Did you see that symbol? I know what that means. And to me, we get to a place where we can watch things and not be brainwashed by them, programmed by it. Like I can see what you're trying to do. I can see what's happening. I can enjoy it for its entertainment value, whatever. I don't really like James Cameron and I don't give 2 shits about Disney, but I can appreciate it for what it is. It's the same thing with commercials. Like you even watch any level of TV and every freaking commercial is a drug commercial. Like you could have every disease out there because you listen to so many of these things, you think that you need it. And once you become aware enough to not be brainwashed and programmed by all of that, it's a lot. It's not, I wouldn't say it's easier, because then you're just pissed that they're putting it in your TV show and in all of your stuff. You're like, stop doing it. But you can at least, for me, it's like, all right, I know my kids will not be programmed into this stuff because they can see it for what it is. So that's at least relieving. But
I love that you both can have these experiences where you can still do things normally like other people do, like go see a movie with your family, but that you're very conscious as you're going through the experience and you guys can talk about it after. I think that's really neat because look, we can't I mean, maybe somebody out there can, but if they are, they're not going to be watching this podcast if they're totally off grid, right? But we still have to live our lives, and you want to try to make life enjoyable for your children. Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that is entertaining for children is stuff that, you need to have knowledge around, and a lot of parents and children don't. And so I think it's really neat because now anytime I do watch anything on TV myself, you look at things so differently whenever you're viewing it through the lens of what does this mean and how does it apply to the world that I live in? what in here can I extract that is useful for understanding how the world works? Because that's what entertainment is, right? It's reality packaged into fiction. So we don't pay attention to it when we're faced with it in real life. We automatically categorize it as fiction if we see something like that in real life. So now going back to what you said, Becky, people who aren't awake, who watch that movie, that whale part sits unconsciously with them that, oh, that's a fiction thing. Like there's substances in mammals' bodies that can keep people young. And so then they go and see some scandal where somebody's talking about adrenochrome in a very real way, because that is a very real, extremely valuable business. And they just automatically write it off as, oh, that's fiction. That's a conspiracy. I saw an avatar. That's not real. You know, that can happen to kids too. That's how we raise asleep kids, is by not educating them that, hey, I know this movie is fake and it's kind of a cartoon. It's GCI, but this happens in real life. Like this is a business in real life too. So what you're seeing is real. And again, not that we want to freak children out. There's ways to have those conversations, but I think that's really important. So when kids are watching that, they watch it through a different lens too, and with empathy. And it's not something that's programming them to think that that's fake. And especially as they grow up, that they don't continue to carry that belief. So I think I just want to commend you girls for doing that, because even your daughter Bridget, like you guys listen to songs in the car and she can pick out things and say, Mom, what does that mean? And you guys just have very meaningful conversations with your kids about the things that they're constantly exposed to. And even though they might not appreciate it now, I hope that they do. But later on, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, whenever they grow up and they start talking about these things with their friends, they're going to be like, my friends, like, it's like talking to a blank wall, and they're going to be like, I'm so grateful that I wasn't raised that way, to where I was so blind to everything in the world, and I was programmed. They're going to have such a advantage as adults being exposed to this with a conscious mind as a child.
Well, it's interesting now that I'm not gonna say we're past COVID, because shit, we're not, but watching shows, like I always watch not reality TV, I watch like vet shows and fixing your house, whatever. But like I'll always watch the vet shows, and it's funny to me to watch during like the 2020, 2021 seasons, because you can see how very fake the mask thing was. So I always watch Dr. Pol, who's in the middle of Michigan. Those people don't give two shits about COVID or anything. They're there to raise their dairy cow, and that's it. Like they don't care about that stuff. But you can see how the producers of the show made the doctors have to put masks on. So sometimes you'll see where they're kind of have masks on, and then sometimes they don't, and sometimes the people have them and sometimes they don't. But you can see how it's very scripted. Like we've got to keep these going. We've got to have this, and it's sad that they would continue to do it, because it's just for the money, and it's whatever. But if you watch shows during that time and you actually look at the people and kind of keep a timeline, you can see that it was all horseshit.
Yeah.
It's like,
to even just remembering to explain the why to your children versus just saying no, explain the why, because most people will just say, oh, because I said so, I'm your parent. But explaining the why also gives them the education. So when other kids are doing it or they see it, I even had a conversation with some friends and family about the music and why I don't let my daughter listen to certain artists and certain songs that are trending on TikTok or, the mainstream. And so when breaking that down, it's like, yeah, she might hear it when she's with them or with friends, because that's what's trending in their generation. But she also knows the meaning behind the why. And I break down the lyrics because I rather me be the one teaching her versus somebody grooming her to say, like, example, I know I've talked about it before, is the song WAP. And there's a Doja Cat song where she's talking about, basically the kids are talking about drugs and getting, excuse my language, dick down at their age. It's like, why are you listening to a 12, 13-year-old girl singing that and talking about that going in her, and they don't realize what they're singing about. So when you break down the lyrics, I'm like, I'm not allowing my daughter to sing that at 13. Like, what does she need to know about that? Like, no. So for me, I rather her know the lyrics and break it down versus somebody groom her and say, this is sex, or, this is okay, and try to mold her in a different way. So that's one thing I try to break down.
That's good all around. That actually happened to me, not in songs, but it happened to me a couple weeks ago. We were at a Christmas party, and it was Peyton's band friends that are all percussionists. So I want to say there's like 13 or 14 of them. They're anywhere from 14 to 17 years old. And Peyton being the oldest in his family, but like the youngest in this group of people, he's sitting there. And of course, they're all doing inappropriate nonsense. Like they were playing Jackbox, but they were drawing like wieners on the TV, like whatever, stupid teenage boy nonsense. I think there are a couple of girls, but it's all just teenage crap. And whatever, they were laughing and joking. We got back in the car, and I said to him, were there words that you didn't understand? Because I'm sure that they were all talking about whatever. I said, was there anything you didn't understand that you want to ask what it means? And then he's like, I will get in trouble. I was like, why would you get in trouble? I said, I want to make sure that you know what those words are or those things are, so that you don't either one use it inappropriately because you're saying something you think means something else, and you call a teacher something that is not what you think it means. And so we were talking, and he's kind of thinking about it. He's like, yeah, there's some words, whatever. And he comes up to me, or that night, he's like, what's a dildo? And so I was like, okay. So I had to explain that. But I was like, well, what did you, because how do you get context clues around that? Because I'm sure some kid called another kid a dildo, and you do whatever. And I was like, how do you even, I was like, what did you think it was? And he goes, well, I thought dodo bird, because they must have used it as an insult. And so I was like, yeah, I don't need you to go up to your teacher and call your teacher a dildo or something, because you don't know what it means. And so that's the sort of stuff that, as parents, like Bridget was saying, as parents, we have to be teaching our kids what this stuff means, what all these things are. Have you heard of the new trend where these trans boys are sticking tomato paste up their butt to pretend they're having their period?
I saw that.
What in the world?
Yeah, and sometimes they squirt ketchup packets in their underwear to make it feel more like that. And I was telling the boys, I was like, don't stick tomato paste up your butt. And they both look at me like, what are you talking about?
Like, again, with these conversations, like, it goes back to how we always talk about parents using the correct terms for body parts,
Yes.
and talk about how the body functions
Works.
and
Yes.
how it works. Because again, symbolism, it's in the shows, it's in the TikToks, everything. Like, a kid can open Instagram, and imagine being a minor opening Instagram, and you saw everything that came out with the Balenciaga and the art, and like the artists who have skin penises on their nose, like stuff like art like that. But it also goes back to, and why I say identify it, is it goes back to survivor stories where they were trying to cry for help, and as kids, they were drawing what was happening to them, where they were getting touched, and all of these images. You see it in even a lot of the influencers. When you go follow them, it's in the art. And so kids are seeing it, and there's so much desensitization going on. It's also in the shows, from the black magic to the witchcraft to all of that in Disney. Like, it's infiltrated everywhere. So having these conversations and breaking down, even like literally, I'm not going to break down the term WAP, but even talking about to your daughter how your body works in their menstrual cycle, and like the blink has going back to the lotus. I'll use that. Going back to the lotus, and like even Avatar, and the wound, and the water codes, and the power, and the sexual energy, and divine masculine and feminine, and describing how all of that works. It has so much power. So if you are the one educating your child with
which you should be,
which you should be as a parent, I prefer, as Becky will say the same, and Emma, I know when she has children, if that day comes, she has all the knowledge of literally every single term and all the trends coming out and how we have to shift these conversations with our kid as the whole pedophilia agenda tries to become normalized, which is not going to happen. You have to follow the trends and talk to your children, whether it might be uncomfortable to them. You have to have the age appropriate conversations, but also know that when they've reached that level of I'm done talking about it, you can circle back and have a conversation when they're ready for more. Don't just slam it into their head, because then otherwise they're going to be like, okay, I can't come to you, or think they're going to get in trouble when having these conversations. So you have to be ready when like you hear these conversations. You have to be ready when your kids throw conversations at you and you're like, wait, did you just say that? And you're like, yeah, but you said I could come to you. So you have to be ready and expect, like Becky had to hear the word dildo from her kid that she probably wasn't ready to hear yet. But you have to have a safe spot for them to land and have those conversations.
Well, and also, like, I think about myself as a kid. If I am so grateful that like I didn't grow up with phones. I didn't ask my parents anything because I didn't
Either.
have like those. So what I would have done if I would have wondered what a dildo was, I would have went on Google, right?
And that's how you follow the porn.
And think about what I would have been exposed to, right? And so if you don't have the conversations with your kids, somebody else or something else is going to, and it's not going to be the way that you want that information introduced to them. So that's the other thing too. Like when I'm thinking about how lucky your children are to have you as parents, that they feel comfortable enough to ask these questions that could be seemingly totally embarrassing for most other kids to even consider asking their parents. And your children get to hear answers that are very, logical, age appropriate, and help them not ever get curious about Googling it or looking into it anymore. They're like, oh, okay, now I can go back to being a kid and doing what I'm supposed to do. And I don't have to go ask somebody. I don't have to go look online what this is. I can just go to mom if I ever need anything. I think that's so freaking cool that you guys have that in your homes.
Well, and how many times, I know for me, like, how many times were you in a situation where you used a word or you thought it was something and you were embarrassed in front of your friends because of whatever? Like, let's not do that either, because so many kids, like we were talking to Red Light Rebellion a couple weeks ago, and there's so many kids that are so aware of like mental health, and they know about the term trigger, and they want to do all these things, and they do all this stuff, but they don't have any ability to be part of a community. They don't have any ability to be part of a team or be a part of something bigger than themselves. And so now they're lonely as hell. We have parents out there that don't know how to talk. I mean, take the sex part out of it, don't know how to talk to their kids in general. We're so stuck on our phones. We don't want to have any good attachment points. And now we give our kids these phones, and what do they get to look up? That boys stick tomato paste in their butt. Like, what the hell? And that's where we're at, is that these kids want to have connection, but the only connection that is given to them through the algorithms, like you're talking about, Emma, is trash.
Yeah. Well, and then you look at even like in general, not only through the youth, but through a society, is people don't know how to feel anymore. And we're so desensitized to things. They don't know what love is, because again, the human connection's taken away. So a child often is going to the internet and seeking elsewhere because they want that attention. No different than even older generation through society in general. Love, and people don't know what unconditional love is or healthy relationships. So having those conversations are going to be a huge part of healing. And even as we often talk about is the childhood trauma. And even like there's times where we see things on the internet and it does trigger PTSD. But also just remembering it's okay to unplug and step back and heal, because healing is going to be a huge part of 2023. And facing yourself in the mirror and your own flaws. No one is perfect, and we all don't have it together. We all don't have the answers. Like, we're all learning. So being able to hold space for one another at whatever season they're in is going to be very valuable and huge for every community and unity as a whole in order to help future generations, especially for the youth and the children.
Yeah, and even if you have all the truth, like whether you want to call it biblical truth or you want truth about whatever's going on in the world, nobody's going to listen to you if you don't lead with love.
Yep.
And that, like, you love somebody, what they do is what they do. Bless you. What they do is what they do. That doesn't mean you have to approve of what they do. But if you don't love them, then they're never going to listen to you, because you're might as well just be Charlie Brown's teacher, whatever. And so that's where truth comes in. And I think, Emma, you brought it up really well earlier. Like, so many people don't know what we know in this space, but we can love them through learning about it. Because I know when I learned about it 3 years ago, like, it's a dark space to be in. And we at least now get to be the candle. Like, holy crap, there's actually a light at the other end of this. You can become better when you learn this stuff. And that's a cool place to be. Like, it's cool to be the person that someone would look to find information or get them out of the hole.
And one thing I want to say about that too, for people listening, and this has been something that we've had to navigate very carefully in our own integrity within each other, and then with who we align with, is make sure the people that you're following are leading with love. There is a lot of people advocating in this movement that are choosing sides one way, and they're creating division from children. And it's really sad and discouraging to watch. You know, I mean, any advocacy is good, and I commend anybody getting up there and talking about it. But if the person that you're following is completely degrading, say, the liberals, you know, they're standing up for children, but they hate liberals, and they're only aligning with conservatives. That person's not truly about children, because as Becky stated earlier, children are not a partisan issue, right? And if you see people the opposite, that they're only aligning with a certain group and then they're alienating everybody else, that is not embracing people in this movement with loving arms. You know, that is not doing justice to people that are learning. That is further creating issues, and you're using children to do it. Children become a commodity once again. They become not the topic of conversation. They become a reason to get clout, but a reason for you to create a community that alienates half or more of the people that you could be reaching. And so I want to remind people too, you know, we've gone through a lot. Like, we've been burned by people that we followed, and we're very let down to see that at the end of the day, they didn't care about the children as much as they cared about the, you know, political movement that they're supporting, you know. And to each their own. We all have our own piece in this. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily bad, or that what those people are saying aren't true. But as Becky said, going into this next year, we need to really get away from that. Like, I don't like talking about politics at all, period. Like, I've totally stepped away from anything political. These girls have too. I've seen it. Like, and before, we were so gung-ho on a lot of our messaging was political also, you know, but as we've evolved, when you actually get to the root, it's children. And like, you know that, but they use it in the media. You know, if you stand up for child trafficking, you're a conservative, you're a QAnon person, you're a Trumper, you know, and it's like they're using children once again. They're exploiting them to create division between us, who should be coming together in lieu of children. And doing anything else is a complete disservice to this movement, because the only way we do this is by coming together. There is no way that we can save the world and save children if all of us are in our own little cults, essentially, standing behind and with just a few select people who believe exactly the same as we do, and we look down on and point our finger at everybody else who has the potential to step in and do something about this. So that's been really important to us. Like, one of my favorite people, and I know you guys too, that I've followed consistently, that you guys have also, is John Paul Rice. No matter what, he leads with love, man. Like, he tells the blunt truth, but he's not too good for anybody. He will sit down with you no matter who you are and talk with you, no matter what level you're at, no matter what, you know, political view you are, no matter what your beliefs are. And he has been so consistent with that, and people love him for that. And they should. And that's somebody that's a true leader in this movement. Somebody who, no matter what, their messaging is centered around the children, not around what benefits their beliefs, not about what benefits their political agenda, that they are in it to talk about children and making the world a better place for them. You know, and I've gotten, somehow, for the grace of God, I got so blessed to have these two women walk into my life who are exactly like that. And, you know, it's a game changer when those are the type of people that you're around, that are very heart-centered, that understand the root of this, has nothing to do with politics. You could take all that away and it's still happening in the world. Like, it's not a left or right issue. It is not a demographic issue. It's not a financial issue. It's not a working class issue. Like, as Becky said, this is happening in your communities. Your neighbor that you see every day could be abusing their child right in the home that you live right next to, and you have no idea. You see that kid go to school, looks happy. Like, we just don't know. And so to create further division when this is already so horrific, we need to do the opposite and say, I love you no matter what. If you want to step into this movement and you want to try to make a difference, I love you no matter what. And we should be very leery. Again, it doesn't mean that what these people are saying aren't true. They could be, everything that they say about children could be true, but are they bringing people together or are they dividing? That's what we really need to look at when we're choosing to follow podcasters or influencers or nonprofits, whatever it is. Are they bringing people together? Or are they pushing them apart? Is their heart focused on children, or is it a political agenda or a different type of agenda that benefits them and then their select group of people? And that's something, like, I'm forever, that's, for me, that's all I look at now with people in this movement. You know, what are they doing to benefit children? Are they bringing people together? Are they not? You know, I think there was, I don't remember who said it, but somebody said, like, it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes the whole world to save one, you know, and that's what we really need to, we need to lead with that. Go ahead, Becky.
No, I was just gonna say, any movement like this one, of course, is child-centered and whatever, but is the person you're following only trying to better themselves? Are they trying to gain influence so that they find an influencer who finds an influencer who finds an influencer? When you read their stuff online, does it make you feel better, or does it make you feel icky? Because if it makes you feel icky, then they're trying to cause division of some sort. And now, I'm not saying if it rubs you the wrong way, yeah, it just might be an ego thing you got to kind of dig through. But really, if you read stuff and you're like Emma, you said, and it's this push against this group of people, or do whatever, then that's not right. Like, your Instagram post or your feed shouldn't cause you to feel icky at the end of the day. And I mean, I know the news is icky and I know that stuff, but if you can pull out of that and you know in the end love will win out and God wins, it doesn't affect you that way anymore. You see it for the print that it is, and it's done. But if you see people and you're looking at what they're saying and you're like, wait, that seems very divisive, it probably is. And those are the people that you need to just step back from. And again, like Emma said, there are organizations out there, and I'm all for people informing people and waking them up. They don't always need to take your money, or they don't always need to take your effort and your time.
Well, too, and going off of that and the advocacy space, and when it comes to the children and human trafficking, I know you guys will agree, and we're all seeing the same thing when it comes to, there are so many more people talking about this now. And as a lot of, I'll use Balenciaga for an example, is when that saga came out, you saw all of a sudden these different movements now talking about human trafficking. And behind it, it was, whether it was a march or music or whatever product was coming out, it then became a marketing thing. It was like, oh, here, I'm going to talk about this, but make sure you buy this. And it's like, no, now that's exploitation. You're profiting. So whether it's brand ambassador, or you saw a lot of 501c3s say, oh, but hey, look at me. This is human trafficking. This is a space I want to be in now. And this is what I'm doing. And it all became a me thing instead of, again, people lost the focus on the overall mission of the children. And how do we stop this? What are steps we can take to raise awareness, but also to use our platforms to educate? We didn't even need profiting at that point. Simply could have stopped at education and awareness, because before, a lot of these platforms and people would not and still will not say the words human trafficking. Even with the Balenciaga stuff, you did not see anyone say human trafficking. In a lot of these movements, they can't say the words human trafficking, CSAM, CSEM. They made it about a brand or Kim K or everything else that they made it about. It was never about the overall mission of child exploitation and the children. So just be careful when you also are giving your funding and just throwing money out there, because there's a lot of people, and I'm going to say it again, there's a lot of people and organizations, especially 501c3s, who say they are helping save the children or save our children, and they are funneling the children back into the system and or profiting,
or just wanting followers because of it, and that's also something that's kind of frustrating. Again, I want people with big platforms to talk about this. It's not saying that just because somebody has a blue check mark, just because somebody has millions of followers, that they somehow shouldn't and couldn't talk about this, right? But it's interesting how none of those people 3 years ago would have this conversation with people like us, much less on their social media platforms. But they come out of the woodwork and all of a sudden care when it makes a mainstream headline or when it's trending, and that's the other thing. Like, are the influencers and people that you're following, do they only talk about stuff when it's trendy and cool and when everybody's talking about it? Or are they not afraid to be the first person to say, hey, nobody's talking about this, I guess I'll be the first, because there's a big difference with that. And we saw that a lot with the Balenciaga. People that should have been talking about this a while ago only started talking about it when it went viral. And it's like, gosh, like, what a missed opportunity, because everybody's already exposed to this. Like, why aren't you exposing and talking about stuff that gets brushed under the rug and that doesn't make mainstream? And if you notice, now that that's kind of brushed over, what are those people talking about? Did they just go back to talking about what they normally do, or are they still advocating? Right. And those are, I think, like, because this is becoming a movement that a lot of people are stepping into, and it's beautiful. Like, it makes me really happy. But it's also very easy to be deceived when you all of a sudden are faced with tons of people with platforms or without that are talking about this, and to not know truly what their intentions are. But that's really, like, we look at all of that, and, we get asked a lot to partner with people. We've gotten asked to work with different nonprofits, different influencers. We've gotten asked to be speakers at different events that we have turned down all of it because it just didn't align with why we are here. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with going, I would gladly go speak in front of like a whole different group of people if the intention of it, just like how Becky found in her church, they're open to that. They're not trying to be popular because of it. If anything, that might turn off some people because it's such a new thing, right? They took a risk doing this. They're not doing it for clout. They're doing it because it's important, and that's kind of the thing that we look at is, we will gladly participate in anything if the message is about the children, and if it's about this message being important and centered on versus it getting more followers and money for somebody, and that being the reason why they want to talk about it or have us talk about it.
Yeah, especially when it comes to the victims, children, and survivors, and even the veteran community. It's not okay to ever profit or gain power or clout off of trauma, or re-victimize the victims, children, and survivors and throw it in their face, and you profit off of stories, whether it be through money, power, clout, however you want to label that. It's never okay.
Amen. Let's turn to something fun. Let's ask fun questions. That was a heavy hour or whatever, how long we were.
That was good. I hope people get some value out of that because it's tough navigating this, especially whenever you're new. And I think it's helpful, like, because we get asked, like, why don't you guys work with this? Why don't you work with that? And like, we're always transparent with people. You know, if we're not supporting something actively or somebody, it's either we haven't heard of them or it's by design that we just don't align with it, you know? So for people to just get to know what we do more, that's why we formed Standby Survivors, because we didn't feel like we fit in with anybody else's model. So we said, let's create what we don't see out there.
Yeah, and again, it's our model is the whole purpose of love, because it really is. When we first kind of fell into this, there wasn't a space where the circle just got bigger. It was constantly everybody's in the wrong, everybody's doing this stuff. And instead of living in a space where, I don't know if you're doing the right thing, but I'm going to love you through it anyway, so you have a safe space. That's where we came in, because we didn't see that. And again, like Emma says, that doesn't mean that the organizations we're talking about, we don't appreciate the effort that they're making. We're just trying to warn you guys. Sometimes they're not out there to do what's in the best interest of you or the survivors or any future victims that could be out there. And so just to be heads up, but we would never badmouth an organization for getting people on board with this ministry, because everybody needs to be aware of it, and it's too big for us to do alone. We just don't always agree with the way.
Yeah, like Bridget always says, everybody has a story, you know. Yep. And that was like when we started these podcasts, even there was never a time where we were like, oh, let's interview the person with the most followers. Like if you look traditionally at our guests, most of them don't have followers. A lot of them have been kicked off social media, or they have very few followers, you know. We're one of the few podcasts that invites that type of person on. That's not the blue check mark and not the popular person. You know, that's never been what we stood for. We stand by everybody has a story, everybody. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't, like, for us, we're not trying to get followers through people. We simply just want to give you listening the information. We want these stories to be heard. They're so important, as you guys have seen. And some of the most amazing stories are from people who have 100 followers on their Twitter account, you know, and don't have a huge following, but they have an absolutely incredible story. And so that, I think too, like, we need to really focus on having these genuine conversations moving forward with people, and like not focusing on how it's going to benefit us or what their following is on social, and just really realize that everybody truly does have a story. And like, whenever you think about people, whenever you look at a new person that way, you look at the world totally different.
Yeah, and with that too is if you do have a blue check mark, or you do have a platform, everyone has a platform, everyone has social media. No following is too big or too small. And again, we're back to the power of one. So everyone has a voice. If you do have a bigger platform and you do have that blue check mark and you are speaking out on these topics, again, once you know better, do better. That's all we're saying. And exactly. If you don't know something about human trafficking and you want to know more, feel free to DM us. We are always open to every and all conversations. Nothing's off limits when it comes to having the conversation about human trafficking and secret societies and all of that. It should never be hush hush, especially if children are being hurt and there are innocent people constantly getting killed. It goes back to humanity. It should be everybody's concern and a topic everybody is talking about. So again, once we start having these conversations, it allows the door to be open for deeper conversations and more awareness on conversations like satanic ritual abuse, and even just, again, how to get involved in our own communities and shift the conversation so they don't seem so dark and heavy. We can now start to help others heal, or say, find resources and say, hey, this is an avenue that worked for me. Once you connect survivors and you connect everyone's communities, everyone can help each other. There's enough space in every single part of this movement for everyone to thrive, whether it's healing and saying, hey, I know this person for holistic medicine or whatever approach, whether it's the food, every single approach to this, there is a way to heal. So we have to lean on one another through love and be there to help each other heal.
100%. And I'd love to shift this. That's like a perfect segue. It's the new year.
Yeah.
Everybody's the new year, new goals. And before we were recording, we were having a great conversation, just decided to save it for this about that. And I'd love for these girls. I mean, it was awesome what they were saying about how we should shift into the new year and about goals, just a kind of a different take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. So it's funny because I've actually been struggling with the whole 2023, like what is this year gonna bring? Because last year was so completely 180 from my life. Like I quit my job, my kid was homeschooled, everybody went back to what they were doing. Like the whole thing has been so weird. And so it's actually made me kind of anxious. Like, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? What do I have to do? And I've had to really be like, and I know we're all like this, where it's like, all right, God, do what you're going to do, because that's how these last few years really have been, is what season am I going to walk through? What am I going to do? But the other thing that we were talking about is, it's really funny with the new year, because if you start to really look back at like calendars and when they started and all the stuff, the new year doesn't actually happen at the new year. They just created that. But really the spring is more the new year, which is why that's how the world works. It's this idea that new things grow in the spring, and after rest comes growth and beauty and all these things. But we now in the new year, as of what will be tomorrow for us, we're supposed to now change everything, and we're supposed to do better and be better, when really as a, at least in the northern hemisphere for us, the rest of them it's summer for them, but for us it's still winter. We're still supposed to be resting, we're still supposed to be quiet and cold, and that's why you eat the heavier soups and the richer foods, because that's what we're supposed to be doing. But they try to sell us all this crap, like do this, and then you fail. And now for the rest of the year, you can be sad that you failed in the first 2 weeks of a non-existent year, because it starts 3 months from now. And so, and I know Bridget's gonna bring this up as well, as it doesn't matter what the calendar says.
Well, think
Like,
about this, right? Like think about just the month October. Like oct means 8, and it's the 10th month in the calendar year, but that should be the 8th month
really March,
of the year, right? Just proving what Becky said. December, there's something with that too, where I think like DEC, I think.
Well, DESA is 10.
Right. DESA is 10.
I never thought about that.
Yes. And so think about that, like that, it's right in the actual words of the months. It tells you what month they are.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it talks about in the Bible too. It says in the 10th month of, but it isn't, that month isn't October. It's whatever other thing happens.
Well, too, and it just goes back to like mindset. And even as we see illusions, and a lot of people's realities are shattering right now. So I know for me, when we are all talking about goals and stuff like that, it's like all these people are saying, oh, new year, new me. And it's just like no different. I often refer to like people with, whether it's addictions or bad habits, whatever it may be for you, it literally is, okay, well, new year, new me. And you start off good, but then say 30, 60, 90 days typically is a trend, where then like example addictions, you have a relapse and then it goes back to the same cycle. So for me, when we have this conversation, I look at boundaries and even just planting seeds in growth. So as you continue to grow, look at your boundaries, because like for me, I'm always there and helping others, but then I'm also working on protecting energy and saying, okay, is that person really for me? Like, what is their intention? So even just looking at your energy and like where you're going to put your, like for me, when it comes to advocacy and human trafficking and aligning everything that I do, as I continue to learn and grow, especially over the past couple years, is making sure everything aligns and where I'm putting my money and my time and energy and what I truly am supporting and the circle that you keep, and making sure everything is in alignment. And some seasons you might just need to be there for somebody because they don't have anybody and they might need you to be the light to get them to their next journey. So even just looking at that too is like, don't get used, but at the same time, again, go with grace and love and be there for other people. And so that's for me is just alignment. And I don't really do the whole like next year's goals and manifestations and all. I don't do all of that. I again pray and give it to God. Right now, one thing I strictly am like, hey, new year, like please expose every nonprofit, politician, celebrity, everyone hurting children, humanity, blow it all up, literally. And don't put us on a domestic terrorist. That's not what we meant. I
That's
meant
not what we mean.
just expose it and let God bring it all to light.
Absolutely. And just really go into it, just as these girls are saying, we probably sound like we're beating it in your head or like a dead, a broken record, but like we really need to focus on meeting people with compassion. It's so easy to caught up becoming the enemy without even realizing it, because that's what we're being mind controlled to do. If somebody doesn't have our beliefs, we're being trained and brainwashed and programmed right now to look at that person like they're our enemy instead of realizing that they were brainwashed too. Nobody would choose consciously to stand on the side of something evil. Like that is something deeply ingrained that's been beaten to their head. Like these last few years, it was just, and it still is, just straight psychological spiritual warfare. These phrases, these things, these messages constantly every day, 24 hours a day being beat into our heads. It takes somebody really strong when you have the world and everything, all the different platforms, whether it's the news or social media, forcing you to look at everybody like your enemy, to say, no, wait a minute. The person telling me to look at my neighbor like an enemy is the enemy, not my neighbor. My neighbor is the one that if the power goes out, if our grid goes down, guess what? We're going to be dependent on our communities. We're not going to have help from politicians if things go wrong. So the same people telling you to hate your neighbors, to hate the person that thinks different of you, guess what? When push comes to shove and things get bad, guess what gets thrown out the door first? Your beliefs, your political beliefs. All of a sudden you're left with being human. None of that matters. And so realizing that as we go into this, that the same people that we are being told to hate could be the people that one day we have to lean on, or that might need us when they start to wake up. That's what we need to focus on, not the people telling us to hate everybody. We need to break away from that cycle and say, you know what? Nobody would choose to stand by something that's horrible. Nobody would choose to be divisive. Nobody would choose to do anything evil if they were conscious that it was. There's a lot of unconscious people that are literally in a state of hypnosis that were brainwashed, walking around being angry at people, being divisive. And we're no better than them if that's how we treat them back, right? So just always realizing that two wrongs don't make a right, and that we really need to beat it back in our own heads, that we are here to love thy neighbor. There's a reason why that is written in the 10 Commandments. That is something that no matter what, Jesus wanted us to embody that with our lives, just like he did. He didn't sit down with the richest people who thought just like him. He did the total opposite. He went and sat down with the beggars, with the people that were poor, the people that didn't know better. He sat with them and talked with them. What example are we setting when we just treat people with hate? We need to really do some self-reflection and say, I'm not playing that game. I'm looking at everybody like they could potentially be somebody that could save my life in the future, that could be a friend potentially. Like when we really just throw all this political crap out, we have so much in common. We all want the same things. We all want love, to be able to pay our bills, to have a happy family, to have a roof over our heads, to not have the government, impeding on every aspect of our lives. Like we all want that at the end of the day. We just have different ways that we've been programmed to express that, and we need to be mad at the people who programmed us, not at the people that are next to us fighting the same fight as us in a different way.
Yeah, and I love that. I love it. And I think that one of the biggest ways that we fix it, we've got to heal ourselves. We are on a freaking hamster wheel all the time. And I'm watching, take whatever, if you like it or don't like, but the show The Chosen, it's all about Jesus's life, all that sort of stuff. And I think it's fantastic because one of the things that it shows is the only way that you can really be as compassionate as he was is if you just slow down. Like nothing is urgent. Nothing needs to get done. Just stop. And so as you start peeling off all of the stuff you think needs to happen, you start to be able to find peace. And when you find peace within yourself, that is when you can extend it to other people. And we just live in such a rat race right now where we have to do this, we have to, work needs this and family needs this and after school things need this. And it's like, whoa, let's just stop. Pick the most important things, the stuff that feeds your soul, and do that. Because that's where you'll start to find, you'll feel love, and that's the only way you can give it. So we can stay here and say, yeah, you need to love your neighbor, but if you don't love you, your neighbor's totally out the door. Like you can't love your neighbor if you look in the mirror and you're like, you suck.
Amen.
You're not good enough. This
Amen.
isn't good. We've got to start fixing ourselves, slow down and start loving ourselves and our family. The world will be 1,000 times better place if we can just find that peace. And I'm not preaching about it like I found it. I'm still working on it.
But you did. Look at
I'm
the
getting
impact.
there.
Look at the impact your healing has had on your family, from your health all the way to what, from healing from what the world's throwing at you. Like it shows in your family, you have healthy children. It does make an impact. It's never too late. We didn't start this journey when we were, teenagers or young. We didn't grow up with parents that taught us this. Like, it's not too late, and you guys are such beautiful living testaments of seeing that trickle down into your home.
Thank you.
Well, too, and just remembering like everyone is going through something. So be kind. Like you never know what someone's going through. And oftentimes so many people don't feel that they have someone that they can go to. And then suicide's been committed or there's a sudden death. And then you have that on your conscious of how you last treated that person or, whatever memories you were left with. So just remembering that too is like, you never know what could happen tomorrow. So to be grateful for the little things, because some people don't have a house or a roof over their head or food or water. And that is the simple little things that we're grateful to have. But literally out our front door in other parts of the world, people are killing each other for that or selling their children for that because they're promised the American dream. So just remembering those little things too, even when it comes to, again, the conversation of kindness and human trafficking. If you are in a position where you can pay it forward or give back, and even just listening, literally just listening will do so much for so many people. So yeah, happy New Year with all of that.
I want to say too, just going off of that, thank you everybody for supporting. Like I can't tell you how much it means to me when I log into my YouTube or I go on Instagram and somebody left a really nice message, even if it's just a sentence, or I see that somebody shared it and tagged me in it, or I get a message from Bridget or Becky and they're saying, oh my gosh, I just got the most amazing message that our podcast helped somebody with their child or helped them with their spouse, or they saw something and were aware of what was happening in front of them. Like that is so rewarding because this does get dark sometimes, whether it's, hearing it, whether it's podcasting it, whether it's talking about it. But just know everybody, whether you're commenting on what we're doing and uplifting us, or whether you're being aware in your communities, that is all such a gift, that we're all given. And we can't thank you enough for going out of your way to support us. We aren't like these major platforms that have millions of people. That happens one day, great. But like, we know that we're here for the people that are meant to hear it. And we're so grateful that the communities that we've built, it totally blocks out all the noise of the people that don't like what we're doing. And it makes it so rewarding that we have so much support around us and so many people go out of their way to say nice things, to comment, to share, and to just be a part of what we're doing and to let us know that you guys are here with us. You know, we feel like we have a whole army behind us, even though we don't have, it doesn't show on our socials that we have millions of people. Like, I feel it. I feel like I have the whole world behind me. And I know that these girls do too. And it's because of all of you. So thank you all for just, you know, this past year and the year before, taking the time out to engage with us, to sit with us on a podcast premiere, or to go watch it on your way to work, or listen to it on Spotify, to comment on our YouTubes, to share, to follow us on social media. You know, it means so much, and it's so rewarding. Every time that we feel heavy, like it takes some of that weight off, and it's like, gosh, this is really important what we're doing. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone. Again, piggyback off of what Emma said, thank you to everyone for constantly sharing the love and support. I know even sometimes when we might not be, like, especially with our podcast right now, it might not as be consistent as it was, but also thanks for being graceful and remembering, like, we're human too. And so in order to do what we're doing on a big scale, is we have to focus on our mental health sometimes too. So you'll see us unplug, but we do appreciate the prayers, the messages. Like, I know that I'd got some recently when I kind of went silent, and people were like, I thought you got arrested. Are you good? And I'm like, no. I'm like, no, I'm
It's
good.
really sad that that's where they go.
Right? Like, no, it's fine. I forgot to check it, but no, we're good. So just remembering too that, like, we're human, and like, even just giving grace. And sometimes I know a lot of people see the trending headlines and they're like, can you guys comment on this? But also remember, like, with our space, it's survivor led. So there's a lot of stuff that is super triggering that is a reality to a lot of survivors. So our platforms are survivor based. So we're not just going to throw and pump everything that's out there that's now trending or mainstream that's on the algorithms, because we built a whole community for survivors in that space. So it would not be okay with us to flood our timelines with it, because I know a lot of people want to hear what we have to say about it. So that's why we try to take it to a podcast. Or like, what you'll see us do is we'll shift the conversation. Okay, now you guys know about this. Now let's go. You guys see this in mainstream. Go listen to this survivor's story. This is what we're talking about when we say this. So you'll see a lot more of the referencing. Like, I know I've tried to do that more, because I don't really, it's not that I don't care about the trending topics and headlines. It's just, it's always going to be about survivors and the children for me, actually, for all of us. So,
And it's not new.
yeah, it's not new.
Right. How do you know we didn't talk about what you're asking us to talk about 2 years ago? Like, we might have already talked about it and we're just done with it.
That's why you'll see a lot of my things now say run it back. Like, hey, let's go back to this, and now let's identify it. Now that you're seeing this here, let's go back to this. But even like with the new year and like closing out, let's just go around and say, like, what are, from an advocacy space and podcasting space, what would you like to see more of or different in 2023? And growth in what we've learned in general, because there's a lot behind the scenes that go on that people don't see.
Who wants to go first?
I can start. And it's really heavy on my heart. Like, this is the thing that 2023 is going to bring to me, is waking parents up. And I don't mean waking parents up to Balenciaga, blah, blah, whatever, cool. Wake up, because your kids are right in your home. And because you're not waking up, you are making it worse. You are putting your kids out in a space that they don't know how to navigate. You're putting them in a space that that could be extremely dangerous, because you're not willing to heal and put yourself and make that attachment. So that's really my, I don't know where it's going to lead me. I don't know if it's just church. I don't know if it becomes something bigger. I have no idea. That's on God's plan, but there's something out there that, ever since, Bridget, when you and I saw Red Light Rebellion, and they were talking about attachments and how if we don't do attachments right, we're going to lose our kids. And we know, I mean, we talk about generational trauma. That's why we have it, because we don't have attachments with our parents. They didn't have attachments with their parents. They didn't have attachments with their parents. And so now, is this the right way? Will my kids end up out of therapy? No, probably they'll still be in therapy because who the hell knows? But if we can make it a safe space for our kids to land, we'll make this world better because more kids won't need to find it elsewhere. We won't have exploitation. We won't have kids having to go do that. That's my advocacy push. And really the whole thing is, how do we become better people again through love, that we can make our families and our communities better? That's kind of my 2023 goal.
I love that. A couple of the things we have talked about, I think like I would love to see more people in 2023 saying, gosh, I'm a flawed human. Like I've spent so much time blaming other people for being flawed. And like, I really need to fix myself before I start pointing fingers. Like, I hope a lot of people just start internalizing that thought and not putting themselves down, but using it as a place of empowerment and saying, gosh, if I heal myself, I won't see the bad in everybody, or I'll focus on the good, or I'll just focus on me and like I won't be so focused on everybody. It's like how Becky said, how do we heal the world if we don't even know how to heal ourselves? How do we heal our children if we're wounded, So that's one thing that I really want to see. I also would love to see people, again, leading with love. Try to stay out of these divisive issues as much as you can. It's okay to have your beliefs, those might change over time or they might not, but we need to open up our arms to everybody, regardless of their beliefs, and looking at people as humans versus all these labels, Democrat, Republican, black, white, whatever it is. We need to get back to everybody's a human, everybody has feelings, and everybody matters. Every single person has a story. Another thing that I'd love to see is, just like how we do on our show, I hope people are inspired enough to have genuine conversations in their own life that are genuine, that come from the heart and aren't just these fabricated, very scripted, surface level conversations. I hope people start looking at other humans with that everybody has a story motto and saying, I wonder what this person's story is. I wonder why they are the way that they are. I want to get to know their heart instead of just what my initial impression is, and having these very, fake superficial conversations. I hope people feel inspired to have a more grounded approach to how they look at humans that are in front of them. Another thing is, I hope people start standing by survivors. I think that there's such a big push, and we've been so programmed to stand by nonprofits, to stand by influencers. And I hope people step back and say, why am I only supporting the nonprofit that talks about the survivors? Why don't I go follow the survivors too? And stand by them. They need you. They need the armies behind them. They need uplifted. They need us there with them. They need an army, and they don't have it, because so many of us are so programmed to stand by OUR or somebody who has a nonprofit. And that's great. Support that too if you want. But don't forget that they're only there because what survivors went through, and we need to go back to and really get down to that root and be survivor led ourselves. So that's kind of, that's what I really hope to see in the advocacy world, and just with people in general, what I hope that they take from everything that we do and everything that they're exposed to with this movement.
I love that. I would say too, going off of the survivors, I hope come the new year, people truly do stand by the survivors and put their money where their mouth is. And one thing that we've made it a point, and why we created Stand By Survivors, was because we saw what was happening in the advocacy nonprofit space. So I hope that the middleman gets cut out and the survivors are given to directly. And what I mean by that is, people go directly to the survivors and they say, they're the new influencers. Can you come speak at these events? Can you lead? Because survivors are leading in love, and they have so much grace and patience. And so many of them have, as far as prevention, and already doing it now, even on platforms like TikTok. You have Yami, you have Katie Ray as a SRA survivor. There's different skits, or when it comes to awareness and breaking terms down and giving everyday examples, there's a lot already out there. So I would hope to see that, as well as other survivors with the bigger platforms, unite with the smaller platforms of survivors and advocacy groups. And a lot of people need to drop the egos and know that it's going to take everyone to come together in healing, and again, through love. And the only way to do that is through unity and us coming together. So I would love to see that in the advocacy space. Oh, that's cute. As far as for podcasting, I would hope as well as the same people with bigger podcasts be able to invite, whether it doesn't have to be us, but someone where
Lisa Meister.
Yeah, Lisa Meister, she's a survivor and has a podcast. If you want to invite her on your podcast, or different survivors on, to actually break down everything going on, but also their story and prevention, because there's a lot that can happen there. And then just as far as with Save Our Children podcast, I don't know what that's going to be, whatever God leads us to next with that. I know for my other podcast, I paused that for the moment because I really just wanted to take a break and just enjoy, like, not doing, well, it's not that I'm not doing anything. My focus right now has been really the military and learning that aspect and how it all connects in, like, prevention. So I know going into the new year, one thing that I'm going to focus on will be community with Becky, as well as prevention. So whether that's a little bit less of podcasting and more in community, I don't know where that balance is going to happen yet. So we'll see what happens with all of that. But that is what's going on with the Save Our Children podcast. And yeah, I know for last year, all of our word was presence, and we wanted to be present. And so I would say, and we'll go back around really quick before we wrap up, is, like, I know for this year, my word is going to be grace, giving people grace, because we've had to have a lot of patience in that. And so grace and love will be mine. But yeah.
I don't have any idea. Emma, do you have a word for next year?
I think love and surrender are going to be my words.
Ooh, I like that.
Surrender.
I like surrender, and to me, it means surrender to God now. Before, it would be like, I'm going to surrender to, the universe or whatever, but I'm surrendering it to God, and I know he's going to lead me and you guys to where we need to go. And, resisting that, it doesn't do us any good. So I want to just surrender to him and say, take me where you need me, utilize me where you need me, where you want me. And I am here to lead with love, just like how you commanded me to, and to really try to stop judging people. I've been, I'm human.
I'm not very good at that.
That's something that's really easy to do, and not that, like, we do that all the time, but it's like, I just want to get it in my head too, that love is the way. That's how we fix everything. It's not judging people. It's not violence. I say, I've put on my Instagram before, spread love like violence, and that's kind of like what that's the fire that leads my heart, is I think if everybody did that, we'd have a very different world that we live in. So those would be my words.
Absolutely. And I would say go with judging. Like, for us, I'm going to say it's not judging, it's discernment.
There we go.
But you can't, change that word, because
I'm still super judgy at the mask wearers.
I know, but when I say that,
I used to judge people a couple of years ago. I was very different,
But it's hard, like, knowing what we know and what hasn't even came out, and knowing to the depths of us knowing, it is so hard to say. We have to use discernment. And it's so, for me, it's like human trafficking, when you know it to the depths, and especially learning from survivors and can tie symbolism to everything, trying to function in the world, you're like, how is it this evil? Like, how do I turn it off? There's no turning it off.
There's no turning it
off. So that's another thing too, like, for those listening and saying, oh, am I judging this person, this and that? It's like, we lead in love and we're kind, but at the same time, use discernment.
I love it. I really love surrender. That's probably, I might have to steal that one, because there's actually a song I was listening to on the radio the other day that was God's Not Done With You.
Oh yeah.
And so
I love
And
that.
so that's like, and I said, I turned around because the boys on my computer right now, I have unstoppable. That was my 2022, one of my words. And so they're like, what is your word for next year? And I was like, I don't even know. I really love surrender, but that song came on and I was like, this is the song because God's not done. I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to do it. And I think it's with all of us. Like he's not done with us. He's not done with the podcast. He's not done with the website. He's not done with any of it. And we just have to hold on.
I love that song. Who's that? Torn Wells, I think.
Yeah, I believe it is. Yeah. I
Mhm.
like his music.
I love that. Any other final words before we do wrap up?
I love you girls. I'm so grateful to be on this journey with you. This is so fun getting to catch up.
Same here, and I'm glad that we finally got to because it's been long awaited and well needed. And thank you again. Thank you guys for really being such a blessing and understanding. I know that my change in season is not easy for everybody, and I really, really appreciate you guys being there and understanding. And we'll figure it out, whatever that is.
Love you, and we're proud of you.
Yeah,
Really
love you
do.
guys. And thank you to everyone tuning in. Again, we couldn't do this without all of you and every share, like, DM, everything and everything that you continue to support. So we appreciate you because without you, again, we wouldn't have these platforms, especially with censorship. So thank you so much for constantly being there for us as well, especially the little reminders when we are down and we need pick back up to have the strength to do what we're doing and be there for survivors. And again, thank you to all of the survivors for everything that you've taught us, for showing up even when it's hard, and for allowing us to even lean on you when we are having difficult times as well. So again, thank you to everyone. And as always, change starts with awareness. When does it stop? When each and every single one of us have the courage to stop looking away and turning a blind eye. You don't get to turn the other way on this issue. Human trafficking is a $150 billion industry. If it takes a woman 32 years to talk about a single rape, what do you think happens to a 12-year-old that's sold 10 times a day? Put down your smart devices and listen to your children, friends, family. The world is hurting. We have a duty to protect the innocent. If we don't, that blood is on our hands. Everyone has a story. Together, we must ride for the community and for the children. It starts with one person. It starts with you. When you say, am I a part of the problem? When you face that mirror and start to hold people and family accountable and start being present. You are not alone. Be bold, be you, be your own kind of beautiful. Stand tall and speak your truth. The world will adjust. We will be the generation to end human trafficking. Enough is enough. Survivors, you are not alone. We hear you, we see you, we stand by you. Take your candle and go light the world. Love the imagination and Save Our Children podcast. Happy New Year. We love you.